Wanjiru, we have talked about what it will all come down to, accountability and the usage of that money, and we've talked about the need for proper governance model. The head of state had said that he would be held responsible for every coin the Kenyan people pay. And whilst that is a goodwill that came from the head of state, he certainly has no institutional mandates over the institutions that have been mandated to fight corruption, for example, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission and the larger criminal justice system that's made up by the DCI and the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. On record is the former president who said, we are losing 2 billion Kenya shillings a day. That mathematically comes to 720 billion Kenya shillings. In this budget, we have a deficit of 720 billion Kenya shillings. It then means that if we were to fight corruption, then this deficit wouldn't be there. Is this what the country's policymakers understand? And if not, when will they understand the cost of corruption and the impact it's having on our economy?
Wow, Ayub, that's a big loaded question. And I'll say there's two parts to that. Corruption is about the money, but it's also about the priorities. Because if you look at it, for example, the SGR project, we needed to rehabilitate that railway line, but the choice of project was to go for the most expensive so that you can load in the rent-seeking opportunities. So apart from the expenditure side, there is also which projects are you implementing? When you say you're building dams, who is getting those contracts? In these PPPs, are there rent-seeking and are there interests already loaded into these projects? Because Edward Ouko, the former Auditor General, talked about budgeted corruption, where projects are conceived for the sole purpose of stealing. And this becomes a very critical issue. If you look at the ceilings in this budget, in terms of the allocations to energy and infrastructure, allocations to health, allocations to education, allocations to devolution, those ceilings haven't changed. So this budget is very much like the previous budget in terms of ceilings, the overall priorities. What has changed is when you look at some of the details of agriculture, they've tried to align to the manifesto, which is good. But we have a problem, as we've been saying, in terms of the social sector, the expenditures on health, the expenditures on education, the expenditures on agriculture. How are you going to have a bottom-up manifesto implemented if you are reducing financing to devolution? So this budget, for one, is killing devolution. And is not putting enough money into the sectors that they promise will create the transformation. So already those rent-seeking opportunities are in the budget because energy and infrastructure is the big sector where a lot of money gets stolen. So we need to ask the question, in the prioritization of projects, who's involved? Usually that's a closed conversation with the executive. We are looking at the privatization. Privatization is going to yield money. It's because we have a lot of inefficiency in the state-owned corporations. Some of them need to be privatized, some need to be rationalized. The act that was passed removes the oversight role of Parliament. How are you talking about accountability when you want to transfer public assets into private hands without public participation and without parliamentary oversight? How are you talking about accountability when people who had active cases in court, those cases were collapsed for whatever reason? That DPP, who brought politically instigated cases and has been running politically instigated cases for the last 4 years, has now been given an even higher appointment. So the president's talk on accountability rings very hollow. And we've seen some level of action. There was quick action when around some of the KEMSA procurement. There was quick action. That's a plus. But at the higher level, in terms of public and state officer accountability and the interest around these big projects, no, the president is looking the other way and in fact has killed and weakened the institutional ability of institutions to respond. So no, accountability is a big challenge, a big gap. Yeah.